So let's have a look. So the female reproductive system now. Let's have a look at that, the structure of the female reproductive system, and then by extension, we're gonna look at the structure of the secondary oocyte. All right. So this is a general structure that we tend to always look at. It tends to be in our face, like if you know it in our face, in the fact that we always see the diagram, no other way. All right. So the fallopian tube, we're gonna have the ovary, the endometrium specifically, and the myometrium and the perimetrium, but we're just gonna look at those, right? And then we're gonna have the cervix and the vagina as well, right? The ovary. So it's a key gonad, right? It's a key organ within the system that produces our oocytes and releases hormones similarly, but primarily estrogen, right? And progesterone, right? For different types of purposes, which we will look at, right? Structurally, each ovary contains numerous follicles, right? Each housing an immature egg cell, right? During the menstrual cycle, now the follicle undergoes maturation with one follicle typically releasing a mature egg during ovulation. So the ovary structure, all right, hold on. So the ovary structure, um, with its dense clusters of follicles, maximizes the surface area available for egg production, right? So additionally, the ovarian hormones, estrogen and progesterone regulate the menstrual cycle, prepare the uterus for potential pregnancy, and maintain secondary sexual characteristics within females, right? And underscoring the structural and functional importance of the ovary in female reproduction, right? That's what we have there. For the fallopian tube now, we kind of call it oviduct sometimes, right? And it serves as a site of fertilization and a pathway for eggs to be transported to the uterus, right? So it's lined with ciliated epithelial cells, right? And surrounded by smooth tissue, right? And the ciliary lining of the fallopian tube carries sweeping motions that helps to propel the egg towards the uterus. Notice that the ovum does not, or the secondary oocyte, does not have any flagella, so it doesn't have any motility. So it's a ciliated cells of the fallopian tube that helps it to move. Right. Additionally, the fallopian tubes provide an environment conducive to fertilization with secretions from the tubal epithelium, nourishing and supporting the sperm and the egg during their journey. Right. So the structure of the fallopian tubes with their ciliated linings and muscular walls facilitate the transport of gametes and increase the likelihood of successful fertilization. All right. The uterus now, also sometimes called the womb, right? So the uterus is a hollow muscular organ, right? It's just thick muscle for the most part, right? For the most part, not really the endometrium, but usually the myometrium, right? So it consists of three layers: the endometrium, the myometrium, and the perimetrium. So the endometrium is the innermost layer, right? So it undergoes this cyclic changing as we saw in the menstrual cycle, right? And it also is preparing itself for potential implantation. Right, the myometrium is composed of smooth muscle that contracts during labor to facilitate childbirth, right? And the perimetrium, right, the outermost layer, the structural support and protection for the uterus, right? Additionally, the uterus produces prostaglandins, glandins, hormones, and regulate menstruation and assist in childbirth. The structure of the uterus with its specialized layers of muscular walls enables it to support embryo implantation, nourish the development of the fetus, and expel the fetus during childbirth. Okay? Really, really fine information. Alright. You guys can hear me, right? Okay. Lovely, lovely, lovely. I didn't see myself speaking, so I was wondering whether or not I was actually saying so. Alright. So the cervix now, the cervix is the lower part of the uterus that connects itself to the vagina. Right. Structurally, the cervix is composed of dense connective tissue and lined with specialized epithelial cells. It contains glands that produce mucus, which changes in consistency throughout the menstrual cycle under the influence of estrogen and progesterone. So it can change its thickness throughout the 28-day cycle. Right. During ovulation, the cervix produces thin, slippery mucus that facilitates sperm transport, right, through the reproductive tract. Conversely, during non-fertile phases of the menstrual cycle, the cervix produces thicker mucus, right? Acting as a barrier to sperm entry, right? The structure of the cervix, um, with its glandular tissue and mucus secreting cells, plays a crucial role in regulating sperm transport and protecting the reproductive tract from infection, right? So it's really important in that way. And this is one of the things that we're gonna look at for it's no, what is it called? What is it called? It's on um, what is it called? Birth control, right? So it's one of those things that we can look at in contraceptive methods, right? Where there are some pills, right, that women could possibly take, right, that will increase the mucus and the thickness of the mucus produced by the cervix to attempt to be contraceptive in nature, right? But we'll look at those stuff, right? The vagina specifically is a muscular tube that serves as a passageway for menstrual flow, right? Childbirth rather, and sexual intercourse. Structurally, the vagina consists of elastic muscular walls lined with stratified squamous epithelium, right? The vaginal epithelium contains glycogen producing cells, which serve as a nutrient source for lactobacilli, which is a bacteria, right? That maintains the vagina's acidity, right? And protect against infections. So you went. I don't know if anybody going to do microbiology, but bacillus, right, has a little um rod-like shape, right? Specifically, not sure. Let me not get into that. But that's lactobacilli, and it's the same thing that is found within lacto, the bacteria that feeds on, spoiled milk and stuff like that, right? Lactobacilli, right? So, additionally, the vagina produces lubricating liquids during sexual arousal, facilitating comfortable intercourse, right? So, there's no sexual arousal, right, there will be no secretion of liquids, of lubricating liquids, right? So the structure of the vagina with its muscular walls are specialized epithelium, right, providing support and the production, right? Support and protection, right, to the reproductive organs, ensuring proper lubrication during intercourse and contributes to overall reproductive health, right? So yeah, so. Mhm. Any questions? Any concerns? Oh, we have the structure here. The bulbo cavernosus. We don't have the labia majora and the labia minora here on this diagram, but you guys can find them, etc. The clitoris, the pubic ramus, right? The vestibular vagina, the bulb, the vestibular bulb, the vestibular of the vagina, urethral orifice, stuff like that are found on the outside. All right. Any questions? Any concerns? Nothing. Everybody's fine. Please drop a one in the chat if we're ready and prepared to move on. I might not see no one in the chat. Are we ready to move on? Hmm. You guys can hear me, right? Okay, we can move on. Cause it took a while there, right? Oogenesis now, the origin of the ovum. Now, the ovary is a vital organ of the female reproductive system, responsible for producing eggs, oocytes, right? And the hormones, primarily estrogen and progesterone. Structurally, each ovary consists of the outer cortex and the inner medulla, right? So the cortex contains numerous ovarian follicles, each housing an immature oocyte. The medulla contains blood vessels, nerves, and connective tissue that support ovarian function. So let's have a look. Proliferation via mitosis. Oogenesis begins before birth. So while the child is still a fetus, right? While the baby is still a fetus, right? Her body is preparing itself for reproduction before birth, right? So you have the proliferation of oogonia, which are diploid stem cells located in the fetal or ovaries, right? So the oogonia undergo mitosis to produce primary oocytes. Unlike spermatogenesis, all oogonia become primary oocytes and do not differentiate into distinct types. Could anybody tell me what is the importance of that statement? What does that statement tell us?
Can you repeat?
The last statement there, that unlike spermatogenesis, all oogonia become primary oocytes. What does that tell us? What do you think it says? What do you think it tells us? What is the major application that we see? Those see it? In spermatogenesis, we have the spermatogonia splitting, or well, going through mitosis to produce a primary, well, two primary of spermatogonia, and one remains, right? In oogenesis, both primary oocytes actually go through the entire process. So that means that no oocytes are remaining, no oogonia are replenished. Therefore, there's only a finite amount of eggs that a woman can produce, right? Because she's not going to be replenished. Her system is not going to replenish anything, right? It's going to produce all of them. It's going to send all of them through, right? So that's what's happening there. Meiosis one, during fetal development, primary oocytes enter prophase of prophase one of meiosis, but arrest at this stage. So before you have, so for the females in this meeting, right? You guys know that you have been producing eggs before you were born, and now after that, now you have the finite amount of eggs that you will ever have in your entire lifetime are currently within you, right? Those eggs, I'm not sure about anybody, right? But generally, those eggs, right, stay at prophase of meiosis one until puberty. So when you're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, doesn't matter what it is, until puberty, all the primary oocyte stays and arrests itself at that stage, prophase one of meiosis, right? At puberty now, it undergoes influence of the follicle stimulating hormone FSH. So, when you go to puberty now, there's hormonal changes, and that FSH pushes the process along through meiosis 1 to complete meiosis, right? A small number of primary oocytes resume meiosis. Meiosis 1 results in the formation of two cells, a secondary oocyte and a smaller polar body, right? The secondary oocyte contains most of the cytoplasm and organelles and is the cell destined to potentially become an egg upon fertilization. So release a secondary polar body. I don't think at the time I was looking at this when I was going through it and seeing like what does that polar body do? At the time I couldn't find any evidence of what it did. I don't think we generally have a good understanding of what the polar body does, but the polar body just goes off, right? And then we take the overall the secondary oocytes, right? So meiosis 2 is only
Sir,
completed. Go ahead.
sir, the secondary polar body is, or both of them, because you have a primary and a secondary. The reason
Mm-hmm.
why we have them is because of unequal distribution of the cytoplasm
Mm-hmm.
during the separation or the formation of the secondary oocyte. So because of that, we end up with two things.
Mm-hmm.
One is going to be bigger than the other one, and because the body doesn't have that much additional resources to take care of the both of them, it will just absorb it and take its nutrients. So it
Oh.
will degenerate. That is the reason why we have a
Well,
polar body.
well, I'm not going against what you're stating, because what you're stating is completely and entirely true. I'm wondering, like, why does it go through the uneven distribution in the first place? Because all meiosis that you see throughout all of biology, does not do that, but it happens in the ovary. Why? I don't know, but I don't think it's in the context of our syllabus. But I mean, do you know why?
No, sir.
Hmm. I'm gonna do a quick Google search after this one, right? 'Cause that's interesting because it doesn't happen. Well, I don't know if it happens anywhere else. I just know it only happens here. All right. So we have that there. So as you rightfully said, right, there's gonna be an uneven distribution there to produce that oocyte, that polar body rather, right? And since the secondary oocyte itself is gonna be the larger of the two, and it has all the organelles to take care of itself, the polar body will eventually disintegrate, right? And if it has any nutrients or whatever, right, whatever is left, right, any remnants will be absorbed. Okay. Thank you for that though, reminding me of that. And then meiosis two now, right? In meiosis 2 now, it will actually complete meiosis 2 only, right? Only fertilization was occurring. So meiosis 2 is only completed if fertilization occurs. Upon ovulation, the secondary oocyte is released from the ovary and enters the fallopian tube. So it enters into meiosis 2. If fertilization occurs, meiosis 2 is completed, resulting in the formation of the mature ovum, right? And another secondary polar body. So there are two, right? So the mature ovum contains a haploid number of chromosomes and is ready for fusion with the sperm cell. All right. So when the sperm is now entering, it's going to complete meiosis 2, and then the genetic material will now combine. Right. So I'm gonna explain how that generally works, right? Differentiation and maturation. After ovulation, the secondary oocyte undergoes differentiation and maturation processes, including changes in the zona pellucida and cortical granule migration. These processes prepare the egg for fertilization and subsequent embryonic development. Okay? Fertilization would be the end of this entire thing, because after fertilization, that's when meiosis 2 starts to be completed, right? So if fertilization occurs, the sperm cell penetrates the egg's protective layers, right? And the nuclei of the sperm and the egg fuse, combining to create the genetic material to form a zygote. The zygote undergoes rapid cell division and eventually implants into the uterine lining, initiating pregnancy. Okay, so this is now oogenesis, right? So we have mitosis, right? Two, basically we have two mitosis, right? So we have mitosis create one, and then mitosis create two more. So it's three, right? From the oogonia, and then we're gonna have meiosis 1. It's going to arrest there until when?
Puberty.
Until puberty. Lovely. And then we're going to release our first polar body. And then we're going to meiosis 2 until when?
Menopause.
No, wait, hold on. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Until fertilization. Menopause specifically kind of occurs like, okay, I can explain that, right? But let's explain after. Cause that's like interesting. I'm gonna explain that, but like after, right? But actually, it finishes meiosis 2 in fertilization, not menopause. Fertilization, all right? So that should be fine, right? So we complete meiosis 1 after puberty, and we complete meiosis 2 after fertilization. Lovely. And it's gonna, after the sperm permutates, then it's permutate. Why did I say permutate? After it penetrates, right, it's gonna complete meiosis 2, and then the genetic material will now combine to create our haploid cell that will form into a blastula, and then form into a blastula cyst and everything. I'm gonna talk about it, right? So that's what's happening here. Now, the hormonal control.
Sir,
Go
sir,
ahead.
excuse me.
Go
Sir,
ahead.
can you go over that diagram, please?
Diagram, okay. So we have mitosis, right? The thing is, based on how this diagram, okay, this is going to be our primordial germ cell, right? So let's look at this side. Let's use the other diagram. Our primordial germ cell is going to produce, it's gonna go through mitosis, right? Right? And then that's the first mitosis. And then we're gonna have another mitotic division to produce oogonia. Right? That's a multiplication phase or the mitotic divisions, right? Two mitotic divisions. Okay? And then we're gonna have now one of the oogonia, we're following this track of one of them now to go through it, right? So it will grow. It really has a growth phase, right? Because what happens now, it's going to grow into our primary oocyte, right? And then we're gonna have now meiosis one, but it stops at prophase until the puberty, right? So it releases the polar body, right? Stops until puberty, right? After puberty now, right? We're gonna have the secondary oocyte now going through meiosis two, but it holds on until fertilization, and then after fertilization now it completes itself. All right, so that's what's happening. Okay, the polar body actually go through meiosis, but with no business. I'm so sorry. That sounds so unprofessional. What we're saying is that we don't care what happens to the first polar body, right? We're focusing on everything else. The syllabus don't ask us to care about that. All right. So we're just following the line coming down here to the ovum. Every arrow that comes off, just the polar body has came off. You know, just following the line come down. All right. What is it about the diagram? If there's anything about the diagram that you don't understand, I mean, there are two diagrams here for a reason. So if you don't understand the next one, then you probably understand the other one a little bit more. All right. Any questions? The person who asked the question, is it any better? No?
Yes, sir. But somebody is asking you to explain again.
Okay. So we start off with a primordial germ cell. All genesis start with a primordial germ cell, right? Right. So we have that the primordial germ cell, which is going to be diploid. Then we're going to go through mitosis to produce two diploid cells, right? Right. That's from the oogonium, right? So remember, the primordial cell produce oogonia, right? So these are two oogonia, right? And then what we're going to have now is mitosis again to produce four oogonia. All right, that should be it. Diploid oogonia. Then if we follow the track of one of them now, one of them is gonna go through they're gonna go through mitosis to produce the primary oocyte, which is also going to be diploid because it's mitosis, so it's retaining a number, right? Mitosis, okay. So we have that there, and then it's gonna grow and develop a little bit now, right? Because there's no movement, you know, it goes into meiosis step one prophase, and it remains there. All right, until puberty. So until after puberty now, you notice that meiosis phase one is actually done. Polar body gets released and it becomes secondary oocyte. It stays there. Right? If there's no fertilization, it will not become an ovum. And what happens is that your body releases the secondary oocyte in ovulation, right? And then the menstruation occurs, right? The menstruation occurs. That's what happens there. But if we hold on here now, you know, and fertilization takes place, they will go into complete meiosis to release that polar body and become an ovum. Alright, so that's what's happening. Okay. Is that fine? Richards, is that fine? Hopefully it's fine for Richards now. Okay. So with the okay, lovely. Alright, so with the hormonal control now, it all starts with the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus produces gonadotrophin, which stimulates the pituitary gland to produce LH and FSH. Notice this is the exact same thing that occurs within the male. Right? But now we actually go to the ovary because that's the gonad that gonadotrophin is dealing with. Right? The ovary would produce estrogen and progesterone. So estrogen now actually gives a positive feedback. So estrogen actually promotes the hypothalamus to produce gonadotropin, and the estrogen actually promotes the pituitary gland to produce LH and FSH. That's so interesting. Progesterone now, we know that progesterone goes to the uterus, right? What does progesterone do to the uterus again? What does it do to the endometrium?
It makes the walls thicker.
Okay, somebody said make the walls thicker. Anybody else? So it thickens the walls, right? Allows for vascular improvement, allows it to become ready for implantation, right? But notice that these give negative feedback loops to the pituitary gland and the hypothalamus. Interesting. Very much interesting. So I think it's in a case where we have to look at the diagram for a little bit. We have to look at the diagram for a little bit and to see truly what it's saying. So in ovulation, it increases the production of FSH and the hypothalamus with a positive feedback, right? Well, what's happened now after you're fertilized or for menstruation, you would actually decrease these, right? And progesterone will decrease, allowing for the endometrium to break down. So over here should be something like menstruation, thereabout. The menstruation would have decreased these to allow for the period to come about, right? Okay. The structure of the secondary oocyte now. For the secondary oocyte that we're talking about, we have the vitelline membrane, right, which is kind of like our cell membrane here. And then we're gonna have the perivitelline structure. Peri means around. So the space around the vitelline membrane is called the perivitelline space. And then just outside that space now is going to be our zona pellucida, right? Within the space itself, I should have started within the space, right? So our perivitelline space is actually space around the vitelline membrane, right? Within the perivitelline space, we have our first polar body that just exists there, right? So after the perivitelline space, we're gonna have our zona pellucida, right? And then outside of our zona pellucida would be our corona radiata. Okay? So that is the structure of our secondary oocyte. Hopefully that makes sense. Are there any questions or concerns? Okay. Give me one moment, guys. Alright, so I'm back. So the zona pellucida is a glycoprotein-rich extracellular matrix surrounding the plasma membrane of the secondary oocyte. So it plays a crucial role in fertilization by acting as a barrier to prevent polyspermy. Right, so we know that polyspermy occurs when multiple sperms fertilize the same egg. That's polyspermy, right? The zona pellucida also facilitates species-specific recognition of binding sperm and egg during fertilization. So it tries to prevent people from, well, not people, let me stop saying that because that is problematic. Alright, so it prevents sperm of different species, right, from actually creating an actual zygote with human eggs. Right, so it prevents that. It's trying to prevent that, okay? The corona radiata now is the outermost layer, right, of granulosa cells surrounding the zona pellucida. These granulosa cells are connected, right, to the oocyte by cytoplasmic projections, So you see that those spines and stuff, cytoplasmic project. Well, these are like cytoplasmic projections to corona radiata, right? So we have that there, right? The corona radiata provides structural support to the secondary oocyte and assists in the transportation of nutrients and signaling molecules between the oocyte and surrounding cells during follicular development and ovulation. So you know that the corona radiata has granulosa cells that come from the grania, right? We're gonna talk about that. The vitelline membrane now, the vitelline membrane, also known as the oolemma, right, is the plasma membrane of the secondary oocyte. It includes the cytoplasmic contents of the oocyte and serves as a barrier to regulate the movement of molecules in and out of the cell. So it is the vitelline membrane is literally a cell membrane, but the one that we have on the oocyte, the secondary oocyte. The vitelline membrane also contains receptors involved in sperm egg interaction and fertilization. The pervitylene space, right? Just telling you that the picture here is not of the pervitylene space, but I couldn't find a nice picture of the pervitylene space, so I just put a random picture there. All right. The pervitylene space is a space between the vitelline membrane and the zona pellucida. It contains fluid secreted by the oocyte and granulosa cells, which provides a microenvironment for the maturation and development of the oocyte. The perivitylene space also facilitates the movement of sperm through the zona pellucida through via well, not via, but during fertilization. Go ahead, Ivan.
Sir, can you go back to the other side, please?
Okay, go ahead. That is it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Germinal vesicles now. Obviously, these are not germinal vesicles, but it's just a pretty picture. The germinal vesicle now, also known as the nucleus, interesting, is a prominent structure within the cytoplasm of the secondary oocyte. It contains the genetic material of the oocyte, which is necessary, right, for not the fermentation, fertilization, rather, and embryonic development. The germinal vesicle undergoes maturation and chromosomal condensation during oocyte development and meiosis. So the germinal vesicle is what we call a nucleus for the oocyte. All right. The first polar body. The first polar body is a small non-functional cell produced during the first meiotic division of oogenesis. Right? I should have been speaking about the secondary polar body, right? But it's basically going to be here, right? So it contains the first, well, half of the genetic material of the original oocyte and eventually degraded. The formation of the first polar body ensures the reduction of chromosome number in the secondary oocyte. That is so interesting. That is so cool. That is probably the answer. It has been here the entire time. So the polar body reduces the chromosome number. That makes sense because you can't have diploid cell. Because if it was diploid, it's going to combine with the sperm to create a triploid cell. And I don't know what a triploid baby looks like. I don't know what that looks like. Right? It probably occurred before, but I don't know what a triploid baby looks like. Right? But I think that's what is happening. So the first polar body is created in order to remove half of the information so it becomes N, and then we're gonna have the replication to become diploid, right? So it allows for proper chromosome segregation during fertilization and the formation of genetically stable zygotes. Alright? Honestly, I don't know what a triploid baby looks like. Lipid droplets also exist. So lipid deposits act as energy reserves for the oocyte and developing embryo. Lipids can be metabolized to produce ATP, providing energy required for various cellular processes, including meiotic division, fertilization, and early embryonic development. And this is just a look at the zona granulosa that is produced within the ovary while the oocyte is being prepared for ovulation. So within the antrium of the zona granulosa, that's where we have the secondary oocyte before ovulation. All right. So that is it for the female reproductive system.